Welcoming our keynote speaker to the stage. Harriet Hageman is Wyoming. She is a great representation of all of us in this room tonight. We could not be prouder of her and more thrilled that she's joining us here tonight. Please help me give a warm welcome to Harriet Hageman.
Yeah! Yeah! You're amazing. Yeah! Yeah! Woo!
That is so overwhelming. What an honor to be here. When Dallas contacted me probably 4 months ago, he asked me if I was available for this dinner, and I said absolutely yes, I wouldn't miss it. I would be very honored to come and speak in my hometown where I live, to talk to all of you. And then when I found out that it was March 2nd, that's a very special day for me because it's my father's birthday. He would have been 91 years old today.
Wow.
And as so many of you may know, he served in the legislature for 24 years. There are several people here in the room who served with him, who knew my father very, very well. My mother just turned 100 years old last fall.
Yeah!
Yeah, I went to see her last week, and I walked in the room, and she was doing some painting. My mother is a fabulous artist, and she was illustrating some cards and envelopes. People will bring her envelopes and cards, and she will illustrate them, and then they use that as their stationery. And she was saying, you know, should I start charging for these? And I said, absolutely, we're capitalists, Mom, you bet. She knows everything that's going on. She follows Congress very closely. She follows what's happening here in the state of Wyoming. And I think that if my 100-year-old mother can stay that engaged, all of us can as well. It's been about 14 months since I took the oath of office to represent Wyoming in the House of Representatives. And we have engaged in a lot of battles. But I have been steadfast in fighting for Wyoming values and Wyoming beliefs. A lot of people say that our country is at a crossroads, with one way leading to completely leftist governance and the other way leading back to common sense. I don't believe that that's the best way to describe it. I would say that we are running at full speed ahead towards radical leftist dominance, and it is absolutely imperative that we slam the brakes and turn the country around. In the House of Representatives, we are fighting for Republican ideals every single day, and on many days it feels like we're the only ones in Washington, D.C. who are doing so. But you also all know that we have a very, very slim majority in the House of Representatives. In fact, in the entire U.S. history, this is only the second slimmest majority that we've ever had. And we need a larger majority in the House, we need a Republican control in the Senate, and a Republican president in the White House. And we're going to get it in November. Our two senators, John Barrasso and Cynthia Lummis, do what they can. But I'll tell you what, after having been in the House and seeing that slim majority and how those votes play out, they truly are constrained in terms of setting the agenda, pushing forward with good legislation and trying to hold this administration accountable. But they try to do it every single day, and I give them an incredible amount of kudos, and I have so much respect for the battle that they fight in the Senate for the state of Wyoming and for our country. We need reinforcements, and we hope that they are going to be arriving in the November elections. And you know what? It's incredibly heartening to see a room full of Republicans. As your lone representative in Congress, you will never know how important it is to me to have your support, to receive your text messages of encouragement, to receive your wonderful notes and letters, to see you at events like this. The fact is that your being engaged helps me to be better able to represent you and the state of Wyoming. So thank you. I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight. to talk to you about specifics, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the specific things that we're dealing with in Washington, D.C. And the reason I'm going to do this is I think that when I am finished tonight, you're going to have a better understanding of how some of these, what may seem to be isolated issues or issues that some of you in this room may not necessarily be engaged with because you don't think that they affect you directly. What you'll see is that how all of these things fit together and how they have been fitting together for quite some time to destroy our republic. So I'm just going to talk about some of the battles that I have had. One of the battles that I have been fighting, first as an attorney and now as a representative in Congress, is mandatory radio frequency ear tags being imposed by the United States Department of Agriculture. And what the USDA is trying to do is force all of our cattle and bison producers to use RFID ear tags for disease traceability. At least that's ostensibly what they say that this is about. But our livestock producers already produce the very best, safest, and highest quality livestock and beef in the world. So that the argument that a mandatory RFID is necessary is really absurd. Why does this matter to you, and especially for those folks in here who are not ranchers? Because of the purpose behind this mandate and what it will eventually do to our ranchers, food supply, property rights, and standard of living. Mandatory RFID ear tags would impose a massive new compliance cost on our cattle and bison producers. In 2013, the USDA estimated that a comprehensive RFID mandate would cost between $1.2 and $1.9 billion to our livestock industry. That was 11 years ago. Can you imagine what the cost would be now? Well, we don't know because they won't tell us. But it isn't just the cost. An RFID mandate would also further the vertical integration of our food supply, concentrating ownership and production within a few large cattle and bison producers, and further empower the packers, who are some of the real movers and shakers behind this deal. We've already vertically integrated our pork and poultry industries. We do not need to do it to our cattle industry. The fact is we already have 4 large packers in this country, and they are already too powerful in terms of setting the price of our food. We do not need to concentrate our food production even further. Mandatory RFID also raises serious privacy concerns. The original plan required that all of our ranchers would have to obtain a premises identification number from the USDA or a PIN, and the RFIDs themselves are actually a form of surveillance. The federal government simply has no business monitoring our producers under a program like this. Now, if someone wants to use RFID, I'm perfectly fine with that, but I believe in freedom. I believe in individual rights, and I believe that our cattle producers are the ones in the best situation to make that decision for themselves. But I believe in the worst part yet. And it's what our friends in Ireland found out just last year. Ireland adopted an EID mandate in 2022, again, ostensibly to be able to trace and control a disease outbreak. By August 2023, just 18 months later, the Irish government announced that they may have to slaughter as many as 41,000 head of cattle in Ireland. Not because of a disease outbreak, because of global warming. And that's the lesson to be learned. Without mandated EID surveillance of our cattle and bison, the USDA, radical environmentalists, globalists, the World Economic Forum crowd, and the UN do not know how many head we have, and they don't know where they're located. But the moment they gain access to that information, they believe that they will be able to dictate numbers and management protocols. It will be at that point that you will see the heavy hand of government seek to impose all kinds of mandates regarding water management, vegetation management, wildlife management, and other requirements that they simply have no way of imposing now without a mandatory EID. With electronic ear tags, they can prevent you from selling your livestock in interstate commerce unless you comply with their rules. Do we want that? Hell no. I believe in freedom. I trust our livestock industry to do what they have done for the last 150 years in Wyoming. Produce the highest quality cattle and beef in the world while implementing the very best range, vegetation, forage, and water management practices so demand. In short, the CID mandate isn't needed for animal health disease traceability. We already use brands, tattoos, back tags, ear tags, or quality beef production. It is necessary to turn our ranchers and vassal states of our federal government beholden to the radical, global warming radicals that seek to destroy our way of life, prosperity, and our culture. Working with Senators Barrasso and Lamas, and hopefully the Speaker of the House, who actually voted for my bill last fall, I hope we will be able to succeed with defunding the ear tag program once the Ag Committee Ag appropriation bills goes to conference negotiations. And that hopefully will be started. But if that does not work, I have one more trick up my sleeve, and that is on Tuesday. I have a hearing before the Office of Management and Budget, and I am putting together a review and analysis of all of the ways in which the USDA's rules violate the law, violate the APA, and that the USDA does not have the legal authority to do this. So hopefully we will be able to stop this before it comes to fruition, because if it does happen, mark my words, 5 years from now, we're going to rue the day we gave the USDA this power. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about natural asset companies, because they're part of it. This is all part of the same globalist idea. This is another one of those radical ideas that you kind of slap your forehead and think, this isn't even possible. Not in our country. How can anybody even come up with this idea? And I know that some of you are aware of the natural asset companies and the concepts because you submitted comments and you fought back against the SEC and the New York Stock Exchange when you needed to. But here's what it is. I didn't even know what a natural asset company was until last fall. And since learning about them, I have been gobsmacked by not only the audacity, but the pure evil that dwells in the hearts of some folks who are trying to control our way of life and destroy our prosperity. In October 2023, the SEC issued a proposed rulemaking to allow the New York Stock Exchange to set up what are called natural asset companies. Now, according to the SEC, an NAC is a corporation whose primary purpose is to actively manage, maintain, restore, and grow the value of natural assets and their production of ecosystem services. In other words, all of the natural processes that currently occur, such as air, and wind, and water, and pollination, open space, etc. What is the purpose of setting up such a company? It is to securitize the natural assets of the property and water that exist throughout the United States. According to the New York Stock Exchange, its proposal is intended to end the overconsumption of and underinvestment in nature, which requires bringing natural assets into the mainstream, and the NACs are a new concept that has been pioneered by this group called the Intrinsic Exchange Group. Now, the IEG is a private company set up and funded by some of the most radical environmental organizations in this country and worldwide. These NACs will be corporations that will hold the rights to the ecological performance produced by natural or working areas, such as national reserves or large-scale farmlands. Now, I want you to think about that from the standpoint of farmlands. Farmland in this country is largely privately owned. Whereas we have national forest and BLM lands in the state of Wyoming, and 48% of our surface estate is owned by the feds, the vast majority of the farmland in this country is owned by private individuals. So I want you to recognize that this isn't about public lands. This is about taking our farms. This is about controlling what can happen with some of the richest, most productive land in the entire world. You know why else the New York Stock Exchange and SEC conspired to set up these NACs? Because according to them, this is what they state in the rule: the environmental policies and woke capitalism, they don't say it that way, that is a paraphrase. In other words, the ESG rules are not moving fast enough, so they have to do something like this. They actually admit that this is about ESG. Now again, why should you care about the New York Stock Exchange or the NAC? Because the purpose of an NAC is to purchase the natural rights, whatever that may mean, of BLM lands, our national forests, our game reserves owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and private property that is covered by conservation easements, and sell them to people like Bill Gates. Such lands cannot be used to generate revenue. The moment these lands go into an NAC, they are forbidden from doing any mining, oil and gas development, grazing, logging, and I will assume food production.
It's called
That's what it's
University
in our farms.
University.
Anything that generates revenue would actually be prohibited. NACs would change U.S. land access, management, use, and ownership as we know it. And as if that weren't bad enough, as it is currently proposed, there is no limit on who can own or invest in an NAC, including China, Russia, Iran, and other bad actors would be free to participate and shut down U.S. energy, mineral, and food productions. That's why you should care about NACs. Just think about Michael Bloomberg buying the natural assets of the Shoshone National Forest. He would then be in control to determine what type of limited activities would be allowed. He could potentially even say there could be none. There couldn't even be access for recreation. In summary, these NACs would have allowed foreign investors, adversarial countries, and the radical elite to purchase and control our federal and private land, thereby controlling our means of production, our supply chain, and our very prosperity. According to Mark Green, who is from Tennessee, he refers to NACs as a predatory means for foreign adversaries and radical environmentalists to control and make money off of American lands, both public and private. Mark Green is one of the people that I am working with on a variety of things, but one of the things that we've done is we have introduced a bill to block any future ability to set up NACs. One of the things to keep in mind about how radical these NACs were, according to the rule, the organization that would be responsible for setting up the accounting standards and determining the value of these assets would be the United Nations. So according to the SEC, the United Nations has an accounting program to determine the value of our natural assets. That is who is going to be in charge. Now, the Biden administration gave us 21 days notice of this rule in October. And nobody had ever even heard about it before. My office found out about it. We immediately jumped on it. We got an extension of the comment period. We got 2 extensions of the comment period. We sent a letter to the SEC demanding additional information. Cynthia Lummis and John Barrasso sent a letter to the SEC demanding additional information. And within about 2 weeks, we were able to generate over 2,000 comments pushing back against NACs. And guess what happens? The New York Stock Exchange withdrew its effort to set up NACs. Now, one of the reasons that's so important is because when I talk to people, I know that we can focus on the kind of the bad things that are going on, and we're scared and we're worried. We're worried about our children. We're worried about the future of this country. But I'm going to tell you, if we engage, if we use the resources that we have, if we use the voices that we have, we can change things in Washington, D.C. We may not be getting all of the legislative wins right now, but there are other things that we are doing behind the scenes that are making a difference. And it's because we have the support of people like you who are telling us what you want us to do. That you're recognizing the risks associated with things like NACs and EID mandates. And you're giving us the courage and the wherewithal to go back there and fight. And when we speak in one voice, when we push back, they run. They run because they know we're right. And that's how we continue to fight this battle. So Chairman Green from Tennessee and I have introduced the Protect America's Lands Act, which is critical to protecting our lands. It would ensure that this horrible investment scheme cannot be brought back up. And I believe that our senators on the other side are running a similar bill over there, and we're going to try to make sure that we never have to face the prospect of NACs again. Now, I have always said that there is a special place in hell for people who to adopt policies that are intended to increase the cost of energy, food, and housing. Our government should never adopt policies that are intended to increase the prices of the very basic foundation of what we need to survive. Yet that is what this administration and the radical environmentalists have been doing for decades now. Supply versus demand is the most basic economic concept, yet the environmental radicals who are setting policy for Biden and the Democrats have artificially destroyed supply while demand for energy resources continues to grow and will continue to grow decade after decade after decade after decade. Wyoming is uniquely in a position to meet that demand, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that our industries are protected so that we can do so. I recently introduced a bill with Senator Dan Sullivan to curtail inflationary pressures caused by higher energy costs and defend the people who are most at the risk of energy poverty. The Energy Poverty Prevention and Accountability Act requires federal agencies, it's just a good government bill. All it does is it requires our federal agencies to show how their new regulations and proposed energy projects would affect the cost for communities at risk of energy poverty. That's all it does. It just requires them to give us the data, which they have always refused to do. They have always refused to actually quantify the cost of their radical agenda. This bill would force them to do there. It is designed to prevent agencies from trying to hide or downplay the actual cost of their failed energy policies. And to the extent that they are trying to do away with the internal combustion engine, which I can't even believe that I would have to say something like that. I mean, the idea that we would do away with the internal combustion engine is such an absurd concept. I mean, think about my mom at 100 years old. And think about the changes she has seen in her life. And think about the previous 6,000 years. And think about what we have been able to create in terms of prosperity, in terms of extending life expectancy, reducing infant mortality rates, not having to spend all of our waking hours chopping wood and tending our gardens. Think about what we have been able to do because of affordable commercial production of energy. And we have an administration in office right now that is trying to destroy that. In other words, they are trying to return us to the 1800s, and none of us are going to have it. Mm-hmm. None of us are going to have it. I had the opportunity to question Dan Hageman from the Department of Interior, and I've questioned other members from the Department of Interior as well. And the question I always ask them is, why is it that every single policy you adopt is designed to increase energy poverty? And Deb Hageman looked at me like a deer in headlights and said, well, I've never heard that term. And I said, yeah, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory, don't you? And she said, yes. And she said, we don't want energy poverty. And I said, then why are you doing this? Why is it that every decision you make is designed to reduce our ability to produce coal, reduce affordable oil and gas? Why is it that you have these agency rules and regulations that are in place that deny us access to our natural resources? And she said, well, we're in a transition. I said, what's that? Well, that's not even an answer. What does that mean? She didn't have an answer for that. We'll go on to the next thing. I'm going to fight energy poverty, and we're going to win that battle. Grizzly delisting. I know it's kind of crazy to ask Congress to actually follow the laws that are passed, but that's what I've been trying to get them to do under the Endangered Species Act. I've also been trying to get the agencies to follow the law under the Endangered Species Act. Under the law, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem grizzly bear has been listed as threatened but not endangered since 1975, and the original recovery goal was 500 bears. Wyoming has since spent $59 million recovering the grizzly bear population, and those efforts have paid off. This is a true success story under the Endangered Species Act, both in terms of wildlife management and the ESA actually working as intended. And today we have nearly 1,100 grizzly bears in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It has grown so dramatically that they now pose a serious and deadly threat to people and livestock in Wyoming. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has found that Yellowstone is in fact saturated with grizzly bears, and they have tried 2 different times to delist them. The goal of the ESA for the Greater Yellowstone Grizzly has clearly been met, and it is time to delist them. So I have included an amendment with the Interior Department Appropriations to delist the grizzly bear, and I have been in direct contact with the Speaker of the House to make sure that as the House bill and the Senate bill cross with each other, and we're working on the budget, that provision for delisting the grizzly bear will be included in that budget bill. I am hopeful we might be able to get there. Some of the other work that I've been doing is that I was honored to be nominated and put in as the chairman of the subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs. And so I oversee all 574 federally recognized tribes, our 5 territories, and then also working on 20-year contracts with 3 different island chains in the South Pacific to try to continue to push back against China as they have attempted to control all of our shipping lanes in the Pacific. It has been incredible. I was so honored because very few freshmen ever get subcommittee chairmanships. And when I was asked to do it, my first response was to say no, because I said I don't think that I'm qualified. I think you need somebody who has more experience and more knowledge about this area. And Bruce Westerman, the chairman, said, I think that you're the right person for this job, Mary. I'll work with you. And I said, then I need everybody to help me. I need the tribes to help me. I need you to help me. I need the staff to help me, because I want to do a really good job at this. And it has been such an incredible honor. Just a few of the things that we've been able to do. As you probably can tell, I'm kind of a freedom-loving person, and I really don't like the government telling me what to do. But I don't like the government telling tribes what to do either. They need to be have autonomy. They're sovereign. They have a right to make the best decisions for their members, just like we have the right to make the best decisions for those of us in the state of Wyoming. One of the laws that are on the books is that they cannot lease their trust land for longer than 25 years. Well, how do they engage in economic development when they're limited to 25 years? How are you going to bring in a hospital or even a movie theater if you're limited to the time when you can lease lands? So I've introduced a bill to increase that to 99 years. It has passed out of the Natural Resource Committee. I'm hoping to bring it to the floor very, very soon. On suspension, I think we'll get it over to the Senate. There's bicameral support for it in the Senate, and hopefully we're going to be able to rest up for our tribes around the country to increase their revenue. Impeaching Mayorkas.
Yeah.
We did it. I'm very proud of the fact that we impeached Mayorkas. I had the opportunity to question him, and I have never, ever encountered a more insufferable, dishonest, incompetent, horrific person in my life. I think I said that to him.
Say it
this
again.
is not a difference in policy. This is not a difference in policy between Republicans and Democrats. I have been to the border 3 times. I have been to Yuma. I have been to Eagle Pass, Texas, and 2 weeks ago I was in Tucson. And to say that this is a crisis that doesn't even come close to describing what we're dealing with here. This is a catastrophe, a man-made catastrophe that we are not only going to be dealing with during our lifetimes, but our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are going to suffer the consequences of what they have done. Just in the Tucson sector 2 weeks ago, we were told that 2 years ago they had 70,000 people crossing. This year they're going to have 800,000.
There are 22 million.
They can determine how they're doing in terms of interdicting drugs by the cost of fentanyl. Fentanyl is at the lowest price in history. It is 50 cents a pill. They are bringing more fentanyl. We had a rancher come and testify at our field hearing. He had game cameras set up, watching night after night after night after night of the illegals when dressed in fatigues, carpeting on their shoes, all the same size backpacks on their backs, bringing deadly fentanyl into our country and killing over 100,000 of our fellow citizens. This is a crime against humanity. Watching what I have seen down in Yuma, what they are doing to our farmers, what they are doing in terms of the destruction of our crops, what they have done to our ranchers, what they have done for our security and safety. This is intended, it is intentional, it is being pushed by the UN, it is being pushed by the President of Mexico, and it is being pushed by this administration to fundamentally change this country. And we have to do everything in our power to change it. And when we get a new president in November of this year, it is going to be all hands on deck because we're going to have to reverse what they have done. Things that I want to tell you about. I feel very strongly about holding the folks in DC accountable to the citizens of this great state and to our country. On the Judiciary Committee, I have had a role in the Biden impeachment inquiry, and in fact, just this week, we deposed Hunter Biden, just this past Wednesday. Interesting and enlightening would be an understatement. I did really enjoy having an opportunity to question him, and afterwards, Jamie Raskin of all people came over to me and said, "Are you a prosecutor?" I said, "No, I'm just your average everyday attorney from Wyoming."
I can't stand Jamie Raskin.
I've also been able to work on the Select Committee on Weaponization of the Federal Government and getting to the bottom of what they've been doing to unsuspecting and law-abiding citizens, most specifically focusing on the First Amendment. I mean, we've been trying to hold Biden accountable. We passed the Secure the Border Act, H.R. 2, the very best and strongest legislation against illegal immigration that's ever been passed. The Lower Energy Cost, H.R. 1. My Coal Act, Cynthia Lummis's Coal Act, is in H.R. 1 to make sure that we can force the Secretary of the Interior to start permitting additional coal production. The Parents' Bill of Rights. Parents have the right to determine how their children are going to be educated and what is going to be necessary.
And I knew tell Albert Salvers that too.
Congress's rightful responsibility of legislating and not allowing the unelected bureaucrats to do it. The Separation of Powers Act to get rid of Chevron deference so that every time we walk into court, we don't have the federal judges saying, I have to defer to them because they are the federal agency. A joint resolution and the COVID emergency. A joint resolution to overturn ATF's unconstitutional rulemaking ban on pistol braces and on bump stocks. That was one of my lawsuits when I worked for NCLA, was the Cargill versus ATF case. So I was pretty excited about that. I think they're hopefully going to overturn Chevron, and that was the case also that was heard in January, but also overturn that ban.
Yep.
Just this week, probably one of the most exciting things that I've had happen was, I have consistently said that the only way we're going to turn this country around in terms of the administrative, regulatory burden we're feeling, and the amount of power that has been stockpiled in Washington, D.C., not in Congress, but in administrative agencies. And we saw what happened. If you paid any attention to the Durham testimony when he was before our subcommittee, if you paid any attention to Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger when they came before weaponization, if you paid any attention to Jonathan Turley as he's talked about our work and appeared before us, our federal agencies have been weaponized against us. And one of the areas that's been the most specific is in terms of our First Amendment rights, our freedom of speech, our free association, our ability, our religious liberties. And, you know, when you've got the FBI surveilling conservative Catholics, trying to declare them as domestic, violent extremists, you know that your government's gone off track. Yep. So, but part of the reason that they've been able to do this, and Lois Lerner, how many people remember Lois Lerner, who targeted the Tea Party and essentially did serious damage, if not destroyed, the Tea Party in this country because they refused to process the tax-exempt status for those organizations and broke them. And she admitted before Congress that that's exactly what she had done. So our First Amendment rights have been targeted and trampled on for quite some time, and it took me quite a while to figure out why. And one of them is because as a federal employee, you cannot be sued for violating someone's First Amendment rights. So if you go to a Catholic church and you attempt to infiltrate that Catholic church so that you can surveil someone so that you can later bring a J6 type of proceeding against them, there's no way you can be held accountable for that. So I introduced with Dan Bishop the First Amendment Protection Act. And what it does, it says that for any federal employee who under color of federal law or regulation violates someone's First Amendment rights, they can be held liable in damages and attorney's fees to that individual. We brought this to Professor Turley, and his reaction was, oh my God, Harriet, this is so long in the coming. This is so desperately needed. We passed that out of the Judiciary Committee this week. It is going to the floor of the House. I know we've got opposition. I know that this is going to be a big battle and a heavy lift, but this is something that we can do to hold people accountable so that they do not have immunity of taking away the most important civil liberties that we have, which is our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly. So the fact is, in conclusion, I'm looking out for Wyoming's interests and also fighting the big battles that we all want fought. We're working every day to pull us out of this nosedive that was brought on by the leftist policies that have run amok. Through it all, I have never ever forgotten where I come from and who I represent. We held 23 town halls last year in the first 6 months. We've also held four this year so far. And I will be hopefully finishing the remainder of the town halls in the next 6 months. I've also returned over $2.1 million to Wyoming through grace work with the VA, IRS, HHS, and other organizations. What I will say, I'm going to give some kudos to my staff. I love my staff, and they have been fantastic, and they are incredibly dedicated to Wyoming. We've made some good progress, but we have a lot more work to do. We all know that. We all know that. By working on this together, by giving each other the support that we have, by having you having my back and me having yours, we're going to move down that road, and we actually are going to reclaim our country. I just want to say last thing, which is this. Everyone in Congress is so jealous of me. Because I represent Wyoming.
Yeah.
We stand for what America was and could be. They understand that we are different than any other state in the nation. Our reverence for freedom and for liberty, for individual responsibility. They see us as rugged individualists. They see us as people who are going to fight back against government overreach. They see us as the ones that are going to actually turn this thing around. And I think that's true. It's been an honor in my lifetime to serve you in Congress, and I will always remember that the seat belongs to you and the people of Wyoming.
Woo! Yeah.
Thank you very much, Harriet, for that speech and all the efforts you're putting in Washington, D.C. Thank you to everybody in this room that had the vision to help put her in that office and give us the leadership and the guidance we need from Washington, D.C. We appreciate all the elected officials here this evening. We're going to move right into the auction. As you can see, the QR codes are on either side of the room. And those QR codes will take you right to our Win Red site, and they will allow you to make any donations you feel necessary. Otherwise, we have a lot of great auction items. I think the first auction item coming up is going to